all the other books were, he expounded on those and brought them into Revelation and showed how the prophecies were talking about the same thing as Revelation was talking about.
So would you say that, Cathern, that he really was a very good person, and what the newspapers and the radios and the ATF, the CIA, the police are all saying he was a very bad person? That's not really the truth that you know him to be, is it?
No, it
He's
isn't.
a very good person.
Because I knew him when he started, and I saw him mature, and the rest of us was maturing too. You find that as you go into the scriptures and you accept what is there and that is true, you will become more mature. He was more mature than any man I had ever met, even though he was only in his 30s.
Okay, there's horribleness said about the abuse of children. I know that people are very, very interested in what you have to say on that subject, please.
Well, our children, see, we had a gentleman that was with us. His name was Mark Rowe. He came from the West Coast. He finally married a girl from Australia, and this is where he was staying after he started to try to disrupt what we were doing. He really wanted to be the leader, but no one would follow him because he did not have the understanding that David had. He finally came to Waco and went to the authorities, trying to get them to come out and do something about us. And when he did this, they said he started about the abuse of the children, and they sent the services out to check the children. They took the children and checked them from head to foot. They also asked them many questions. They really gave them a thorough examination. And the lady that came out, I talked with her, and she said, these children are very well mannered, and they are very smart children, far beyond their age, and she could find nothing wrong. There were no abusive marks on them, and this was true because David loved every child that was there. And when he would buy his little boy, one incident was when he bought his little boy a red wagon. He bought 12 red wagons and gave them to all the children about that same age. When he bought these toys for them, we had put in this huge sandbox because they said, well, you know, your children do not have much to play with. Well, I find that children really don't need much to play with. But anyway, he brought in tons of sand, this beach sand, and they had put a wall up, a short wall, so it would be held in the area. And he filled it with this beach sand, and the children just loved it. But he also bought these little tonker, I think they're called, where they could use the trucks and the different type vehicles that men use when they're in that business.
Cathern, could I also ask the question, could we go into the detail of what happened on that very eventful day when, about the newspapers, about who was it that brought the newspaper in, and what proceeded after that event?
Well, we had already known that the men across the street, young men that were there, were not what they claimed to be. They claimed to be going to the college at TSTC. And they had very nice cars, exceptionally nice cars for anyone that went to TSTC, because this college was not a college where people with money went. This was more for the normal person that was trying to get an education. And Wayne checked on them. he and I used to talk a lot together. I worked for Wayne for a while, quite a bit, and I said, I don't know, but then they all had these really nice cars, and so they were not what they said they were. And so Wayne checked them out, and we realized that they were there to keep track of us and to see what we were doing. We did not know what part of the federal government they belonged to, but we knew that they were not just young men that was going to school, and they were, most of them in their 30s. They weren't young enough to be going to that particular college. Anyway, the day before the raid, the day of the raid, one of the men came over with the newspaper, and they were running a 7-day article on us. And the article they were running was based on what Mark Rowe had told them. So they brought the newspapers over, and of course everybody came down to read it. One of our men went out and bought quite a few newspapers and brought them in so everyone could read it.
Could I interject here? Does that mean that everybody was free to walk in and out when they want to? They weren't prisoners. They weren't kept in a compound.
No way. No way. The funny thing is, when I first talked with David, of course, Jonestown was very much in the news, and I told him, David, if this is a Jonestown, I will not stay. And he said, you don't have to worry, this is not a Jonestown, and I will prove it to you. And he did. So I stayed. But when they brought these papers in, I had come down to look at them, and everybody had them strewn all over the place. And so I thought, well, I'll wait. And I went up to my room. My room was on the second floor in the back of the house. And finally I came down when I realized that maybe everybody had read the newspaper, and I picked up the complete paper and brought it upstairs to my room. When I get up there, I put it on my bed, and I was going to lay down, and in fact I started to lay down, and I heard this noise. We had a lot of airplanes and choppers going over the building, and we knew they were taking pictures because they flew so low, and it was a constant surveillance. So I get up and went to my window was in the back, and there was a roof down about 2 or maybe 3 feet from my window down to a roof. And I went and looked, and it really astounded me because these 3 choppers were coming in on an angle and firing, and I could hear the bullets, and I could see the flames. And it wasn't until quite a good long while later that I realized they were firing at David's room. David's room projected out from the building, and it was down on the right-hand side of it in the back. And there could have been no other reason for them to be firing in that direction. Anyway, when they started to turn, I realized that very well could come into my room, so I lay down on the floor. And then there was no noise. There was no other firing going on when this happened. There was no noise, and so the next thing I knew, they must be in the front of the building because they started to fire again. As they turned, there was nothing for them to fire at. But when they got to the front of the building, they would be firing at the building again. And then I heard all hell break loose. You could hear all the firing that was going on from the guns. And I didn't tell you that when I was downstairs, there was 2 big windows in the front room in the foyer where I was, where the newspaper was. And I looked out the window, and I saw these vehicles coming down, and I thought, what are the men going to do with all that? 2 big vehicles like that? They would do things, and sometimes the women would know too much what they were doing. They would clean the place up, or they would bring things in. One girl told me, she said, you know, I thought they were full of firewood. She said, I thought we were bringing that in so we could burn it. But I didn't see the men that get out of it because I went upstairs immediately. One of the ladies who was on the same floor,